Time for announcements. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you are here. You can see my wonderful guests, Jezmina, Paulina, fabulous. We're going to get into their work in a little bit. But as you know, first things first. So what am I drinking today? I changed it up today. I figured you guys might be tired of hearing Eleuthero, my favorite adaptogen. Yes, Eleuthero. Now, instead I put in some rhodiola, a little of the Vana holy basil. I got some Bacopa in here as like a last minute throw in, and oat straw because I have been moving the store all month long and I needed a little muscle recovery. So, cheers. That is the good stuff, at least today. So, what have we got going on? Well, as always, if you're here, you're seeing us on YouTube, Kick, or Facebook. Thank you. But you can also check out things that we post on TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, there's all kinds of fun places you can find Magus books and herbs. Things that are coming up for the rest of this month as we're winding up May and winding up people coming to this location to find us. We've got tonight, of course, I'll be teaching Herbalism Year 2. That will be a blast. It is always fun to teach that class. You can catch our little live cast on herbs on Thursday at 11:15. The Stoned on Friday will be at 11:15, and the divination show. We're kind of going through tarot on the divination charts and associating numerology with tarot as just an easier way to start learning and memorizing what your cards mean. It gives you a couple of keys to know the number and the suit, and I love that because I just think it makes it better. Saturday, Standing Stones will be right here, right in this room where I am right now for the very last time. Not that they'll be done with their series of classes, but that they will be in the new location in June. Yes. So that's at noon. That's a totally free class. Palmistry was last week, so that means on Sunday, sign up if you'd like to. We're definitely going to do the Gateway to the Gods class. Probably, maybe some African Dream Root, because I'm fond of it. But that is a fabulous class. It is not a by donation class, sorry, because we got to make you some tea. But it is a lot of fun. We do a little knowledge on the herb that we're dealing with, the cultural setting for it, the chemistry, all the basics. We have our little sample. We take a little break, and then we come back together to do a guided meditation so that you can push what is really a beginner dose of that tea, should you choose to opt in for the sample, and just take that as far as you can push it so you can decide for yourself if this particular entheogenic herb is worth your time. Standing Stones this Saturday is Your Magical Name and Personality. That is always a fascinating discussion, and it's never the same, really. Love that one. So I recommend that one heartily. We do have some fun events coming up in the new location, but I'm so fixated on moving that you're going to hear about them all next week. In the meantime, know that our readers will be here. So today, Wednesday, Megan should be here from noon to 6. She'll be here on Thursday as well, noon to 6. On Friday, Ravenwolf will be here, but only from 1 until 4. And then on Saturday, Ravenwolf and Megan usually split the day, with Ravenwolf coming in at noon and Megan here by 3. And Sunday, Doc Murphy should be at the new location. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see if we can get everything over there. I don't know how skeletal we'll be, but we will be there. That, however, is our morning announcements. So instead, now let me reintroduce you to Jezmina, to Paulina, the wonderful, the fabulous, and this is the work that I wanted to show off of theirs today. This is Secrets of Romani Fortune Telling, Divining with Tarot, Palmistry, Tea Leaves, and more. Why? Because it's their fault. And I love that about them. So what led you folks to writing this wonderful little guide?
It really starts with how we met and started to do our podcast. And so Paulina had reached out to me ages ago, and you can talk a little bit more about why too, but to ask if I was interested in doing a podcast. And I initially said no, because I had a lot going on in my life at the time. My mom had just died. I was really, really sick with long COVID. and still recovering. And I was also very aware, I grew up mixed and assimilated. And Roma are a pretty insular group of people. Roma refers to the diasporic ethnic group originally from India. We're also known as gypsies, but it's technically a racial slur, and especially in the US, although we acknowledge it's used more neutrally in the UK. But it's one of those words that just, Roma can use it. If you're not Roma or it doesn't apply to you as a related group, it's best not to use it. And so, we were talking about doing something, but as a mixed and assimilated person, I felt a little bit uncomfortable taking up that much space. So I was like, I will ask around for you and all my friends who I asked if they would want to do it with Paulina. They were like, just do it. Stop being so weird. And so, through the podcast, a publisher reached out to us, and we initially were asked to write about folk magic, but we felt like we would rather write about divination because it's been so popularized and it's something that people use that's ours that they don't even know. Paulina, do you want to share why you reached out to me initially?
Yeah, so I grew up in a closed Romani community, and I had an arranged marriage. I was engaged like at 14, and then I had a wedding at 17, and I ended up having 2 kids like super early, and I decided to leave my community and just kind of like pursue my own dreams. Even fortune telling was something that we were expected to do, like it was the only thing we can do. I was taken out of school. It was just kind of an interesting time, I guess I would say. But as I was leaving, like I saw that there was other people that needed, I don't know, like just some kind of information or support. Like there was really no resources I felt like that we could even hear about or go to. And I was like, maybe we could just talk, like, and just get it out somehow. And I had come across a video, an educational video about Jess was actually talking in a YouTube video like about Roma, and I was like, this is so interesting. Like I would love to have them like communicate like to the rest of the world. And but I didn't really know, like we didn't really know exactly what we wanted or what we were gonna do. And then it ended up just kind of working out, and now we're here.
Yeah, Romanistan podcast was born, and then Secrets of Romani Fortune Telling.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So where can we find your podcast?
It's everywhere you find podcasts. So, Spotify, Audible, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere. Yeah.
And you can also listen to it on our website, romanistanpodcast.com.
Yeah, we have a lot of resources there. So if you want to know more about like our current human rights crisis or what our arts look like or our Holocaust archive, we link to as many resources as we could think of there. So,
that's
education.
fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, it was always for me growing up. I was telling you guys before we went live here that my little Irish grandmother emigrated twice and wound up here in her 30s. She was deeply, deeply ashamed of being part gypsy. And I looked at it and I went, I bet that's just homeless people during the Irish famine. Not really. But it is one of those weird things where it takes these cultural shifts. There are times my grandmother absolutely mortified that this was part of her heritage, deeply, deeply ashamed as someone who had been assimilated in, if that's where she came from at all. Just that idea. Whereas I, as a little kid, when she's telling me, I think this is the coolest thing on the planet. I think this is amazing. This just makes me more unique. It makes me more special. And now come to think like probably no, probably absolutely not, but that's okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's one of those things that it's so sad because it's really just how ingrained the anti-Roma racism is that creates that shame. Even in people who are certain of their legacy and otherwise proud, like my grandmother didn't tell her own children until they were adults that they were Roma because she was trying to protect them from the intense racism. And it was like she was, proud of her heritage, but it was still a secret. And both Paulina and I were asked to keep our heritage secret by our family, not to tell anyone, we're gypsies, because then the racism starts,
Exactly. Yeah, and you never know where it's going to come from. You never know who's going to look a little askance at you and decide you're less human because of some piece of your heritage. I've even been questioned because of my hair. I've had people harshly question, are you this? Are you that? And you can tell by the questioning, they're looking for that excuse to decide that
Mm-hmm.
you're less human,
Yeah.
which I'm very happy when those people don't come back to the shop. We do a sign on the door. It says, if you have COVID, racism, or homophobia, please go home until you get better.
That's great.
Just
That's a good policy.
what I tend to think, yeah. So I'm also fascinated by the fact that you folks have resources on the Holocaust history, because that was something that, because I paid attention to it as a little kid, because it is so, was something that I keep having to tell people about. I find that there were 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust horribly, but there were 6 million other people, and the vast majority of the Roma that they could get their hands on, they murdered.
Yeah.
And that's a huge piece of heritage that I just don't see commemorated enough. So I'm so happy you guys have that on your site. Do you guys have any particular thoughts or pieces of
We
info you
both,
wanted to share about it?
yeah, we both actually like have ties to our specific families being victims of the Holocaust. And Jez, you can talk about your grandmother and my family, like my great grandmother used to talk about those stories and how they had come here and it was just like really horrific, and then the other half of my family came here like because of slavery, like in the late 1800s. So
Mm-hmm.
Roma people have a very um a traumatic history in general with throughout the whole world, and especially in the US, especially because of the Holocaust, which nobody seems to know about. Like, you're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah. My family is actually technically Sinti, which is depending on your opinion, and it is pretty contentious, either a subgroup of Roma or a related group to Roma. I often just call myself Roma because I know that there is some mixed ancestry there, and like no one knows who Sinti are, but when we're talking about the Holocaust, we often like to distinguish like the Roma and the Sinti because we have differences enough that it sometimes people prefer to just be called Sinti. And
Well,
so my
and it's
grandmother,
easier to know and understand that if you understand what some of the differences are so that you can
right.
be more respectful about it. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So I like to share that because we don't want any Sinti erasure. But my grandmother grew up during the Holocaust, hiding her ethnicity, and lost family members, and survived in a very frightening time with a lot of very traumatic memories, and came to this country with wanting to keep that a secret. But when I was a child, she wanted me to know about it because she didn't want our traditions to die with her. And there are some really great resources if you want to check it out, called Rom Archive, which has a beautiful, thorough archive of Romani and Sinti history. And if you also want to know more about Romani slavery, which lasted for about 500 years in present-day Romania, which is why so many Roma live in Romania, you can look at the work of Magda Matake. It's her last name is Matache, and she writes very beautifully and powerfully about these things. And like you can find her articles everywhere. And she's also a professor at Harvard, and the FXB Center just published the very first study on Roma in America there. So she's definitely a hero
That's
of ours.
cool. Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, I love that. So all of that led to you guys, all of your history, all the family history, everything brings you guys together. You start your podcast, you become podcast famous, of course, 'cause that's how it works for everybody.
Always.
Um, and then you guys decide to write a book on fortune telling. What particularly motivated you to do fortune telling, especially? Is it just stronger familiarity, the history of it?
It's
What
kind
brought you
of
guys?
everything, like both Paulina and I were literally raised to do the work. And so it's our job. But then it's the thing that people were asking us all about, where to get resources so people can practice tarot without cultural appropriation and do more cultural appreciation. Like, where can we share about these things? And we were like, I guess you just got to talk to people. Like, there's just not like a book quite like this, geared for like, this is how you do it. And this is the history and cultural context. And this is how you can approach it like a business the way we do. And this is how you can avoid all the sticky parts and do it the right way with inclusivity and uplifting other Roma creators, etc. So, when people kept asking for the resource and then Wiser reached out to us, it was just like, I think, this is obviously the book we need to write. And in the style of our podcast, because we love to interview people as a way to uplift community and spotlight community. We also have a lot of contributors to the book. So a lot of folks who contributed quotes and thoughts. So it's not just us, because Roma are a really big, diverse ethnic group. We don't represent all Roma or speak for all Roma. So we try to include other voices.
Well, that makes sense. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Paulina?
I feel like, that's totally right. Like, we don't speak for all Roma, and all of our experiences are different. Some Roma don't even practice fortune telling. Some Roma have many different trades, and also some Roma don't have any trades. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, some people are just regular people, but this book, there's really nothing out there like it, and I'm really not just saying that, but we've tried, like, we've looked, especially throughout this process. So we really hope people will check it out.
And we did shout out some thank you. We shouted out some Roma authors who we really appreciate too, who have written fortune-telling books that were not explicitly Roma fortune-telling books. So Lisa Boswell and April Wall are really wonderful writers, and we mention them in the book so you can find their work. And Ilva Mara Rajaszewski too.
I love that. I love that you reach out and give credit where credit's due, like that admission, like, I am standing on the shoulders of people who have come before me, and that's part of the whole process.
Well, that's good,
right?
Yeah.
My history is part of who I am. I can't help that. I do love that you do cover the history, because most of the books that I've read that attempted to talk about the history of tarot wind up talking about Egypt. They wind up saying it's Egyptian or no, it's not. And that's as far as the debate usually goes. So I love that you're covering some of the history in here, and it's a real reclaiming of that heritage as a result. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Oh gosh, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, we tell the history as fortune tellers. Neither of us are historians, but we share what we know and from our lived experience. And because a lot of these things, like, there aren't really records of who the very first person was who used the tarot as divination, but it is likely Roma, because of Roma's presence at that time, and because we were already doing that, and it became like what we were doing. So it's one of those things that it's like, if you're looking for a lot of citations, it's not that kind of history, but if you're looking for like the oral spoken history, then that's us.
Well, and there's a lot to be said for that. I know that when studying Chinese medicine, I was basically taught to say, well, that's not nothing, that's empirical knowledge. Thank you very much. To give it more validity and more weight when you're talking to people, which I thought was adorable. So but I think those oral histories are important, not only for what they might be telling us with complete and total accuracy, but also for the shading that they provide, for the coloration of that history, because it gives context in a way that just facts can never give. So I think you're always looking for, at least when I'm reading history, I'm always looking for more than the bare facts. I really don't ever want to take a class like I had to as a kid, where I was memorizing battle dates, because why? But if we're maybe reading the biography of somebody who lived through it, and we're getting some of their quotes from their letters, now I'm getting a feel for what it was like to be there. And I think that's more important than that battle happened in 1842 at this location, and these people won the battle. There's a limit to how much I care about that. I'm sorry for you war buffs, I apologize. But I think the humanity of it is at least as important as any recordable facts.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing too, because so tarot, we know, was created in Italy in the 1400s, and that's when Roma started arriving. And we know it was originally a game, and we also know that Roma started reading divination with the tarot cards to make a living as part of our survival trades. Because it was a tail end of the Crusades, which was messy as hell. It was a bad time for foreign people to be showing up in Europe, and it's continued to be a bad time. And that's it's so interesting because a lot of people, especially in our industry, like, that we all share, love the idea of the gypsy stereotype or the gypsy archetype. And a lot of that comes from our nomadism. And a lot of people don't realize that our nomadism was out of centuries of persecution. And a lot of people, still today, Roma are mostly settled, but some people are still nomadic. But it's not the kind of like sexy, fun CV Nicks kind of nomadism that you think of. And a lot of folks are kind of like, oh, but I mean it in a good way. And it's like, I mean, I appreciate that you think you mean it in a good way. I do. And we're definitely not trying to shame anyone who didn't know better, but it's like, it's that kind of stereotype erases our history,
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's not like this traveling had to do with a desire to travel. This traveling had to do with, thank you very much for letting us get some water and food. And we understand you don't want us moving in, and we're moving on. Okay, peace. That's not the same thing as I bought a minivan and I'm going to roam around the country.
Yeah, part of this book too is that we just really wanted to set the story straight because there still is a lot of erasure still going on, and we get tons and tons of hate comments of like, gypsies didn't invent anything and this is this and that is that. And the truth is, like, I think that there has been a lot of erasure, purposeful erasure by, I think, just Western societies in general, tying Roma to divination as well as even like boho style and things like that. Like, we really don't get credit for anything because I guess it's just, like why did it have to come from us, like the outsiders, and we're from India and there's so much like stigma against us and racism. Yeah, like, ooh, like, oh my gosh. And so there's definitely that. I think the verbal part of communication is, I just kind of wanted to backtrack on that a little bit because there's so much society can take away from us. They can burn the books and they can take us off the internet and they can do all of those things. But that verbal communication, like, look at us, like, we're in 2025 and how do we have these stories from 1,000 years ago? Like, there's really something to talk about, like storytelling and verbal history. And maybe it's not completely perfect and it's a little bit skewed, but it's a lot better than a lot of like the hate and erasure that's going on. And it's more accurate than the erasure that's going on as well.
Exactly. And we need it because without diverse perspectives, we can't grow. And if we're not growing, we're decaying. If we're decaying, it's time to move on. You know what I mean? Sure. It's just, absolutely have to. Now, I say that as the child, grandchild, and great-grandchild of immigrants. So I might have been raised with a little bit of a bias about the importance of, and in fact, lectured by my British grandfather that the reason Britain became Great Britain was because of wave after wave of being conquered over and over again. And the contributions those people made to a society that got built as an amalgam of all of those cultures. And the necessity of that you can't shun that new immigrant because that immigrant's going to be Marconi. That immigrant is they will perform miracles. And the sacrifices they made to get as far as they've gotten are profound. Sorry, I could wax poetic about that for 25 minutes.
And it's so true. I mean, we're in such a scary time right now where there literally is a resurgence of neo-Nazis. And like, I actually grabbed this little image of my great-great-grandma who taught my grandmother fortune telling. And she's the reason that, during the Nazi regime, she wanted to teach her grandchildren, even though it was very risky and she was actively hiding at the time. And, but like it's happening again in different ways, and all this hatred around immigrants and immigrants being illegally detained, it's very scary. And so if we're not telling these stories, and storytelling, like Paulina is saying, is so important because it's humanizing. Like, it's easy to hate something you don't understand. It's a little harder to hate something that you kind of love and relate to, even though you didn't want to. And a lot of people engage with our culture without even knowing it. Our music, our art, our divination, our spirituality, our stories, even our language is like ingrained in all of the places that we have lived. And you might love us without knowing us. And so we want you to know us.
I think that's perfect. Yeah. And yeah, having looked at a number of pieces in this book, I can't say I've read it cover to cover. I get a lot of books in here, but I have read pretty significant chunks. And I think you guys do an outstanding job of just telling those stories and getting the perspectives across that I think a lot of people don't have and will benefit from. So I'm going to tell everybody to go buy this book again. Yeah, you're very
We
welcome.
wanted it to feel like storytelling. Like it's part memoir, it's part how-to, it's part history.
Now, does this mean that maybe there's another book that will be coming, perhaps on folk magic?
Well.
There could be things in the works.
Be very soon.
Well, I will have my fingers crossed. I will be looking forward to it. I think it's fabulous. I also love that kind of work, that folk magic kind of work, in part because you can pick up a book by a Chinese American first generation immigrant, the child of an immigrant, and get all of their folklore that they were taught and all of their folk magic that they were taught, and throw it in next to a book like the one you might be coming out with soon, we hope. And see the commonalities. And for me, that's not just remembering and retelling and getting to respect those origins and stories. It's also about what we all have in common as humans.
Mm-hmm.
All human beings are going to look at the color red and they're going to think of hot. This is because fire is red. This is because the burner on your stove turns red. It's not, there are things that are just universal human experiences. And I think the more we know and recognize that, I think the more willing we become to explore the variance and appreciate rather than appropriate.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that some of the things that they associate with like the stereotypical fortune teller are kind of like exaggerated Romani dress. And so we also really like to send people to the source where it's like, okay, like please don't dress up in the gypsy fortune teller costumes and don't call yourself gypsy so-and-so if you're not. But at the same time, if you love our fashion, there's this beautiful fashion brand that we love so much, Loli by Zita Moldovan. There's Romani Design, which we adore. Like there are like Romani fashion brands. And so it's like you can participate and you can also support and help. And and we try to, we have our social media Romanistan podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and we try to post things and share things because ideally we're trying to create a community that Roma all over can feel they belong to. And we're very clear that Romanistan, which is the concept of like, if we had a country, that's sort of intangible country, it would be Romanistan. And Romanistan is queer and trans, and we don't have to be super traditional. You can be mixed. You can be disabled. It's like everyone connected to the experience.
You recognize diversity within the community and strive for, I don't know, inclusion and equality?
Yeah.
Is that
equity? Ideally.
Just equal. That's all we want.
Yeah, there was somebody who I vaguely follow that came up with this whole, DEI is a lie because we are diverse. There is no escaping that. That's just a fact. What you're really concerned about is equity and inclusion and whether or not those things should happen.
Yeah.
And once you get past that hump of, diversity is not optional. It exists. It's real.
It's always existed.
Yeah. There have always been people who've moved. There have always been people for a whole variety. And I often refer to myself as an immigrant to Minnesota because I was not raised in Minnesota. And I was raised far enough away that the customs here are different. There are definitely cultural pieces that I did not grow up with that are improvements, and ones that are, in my mind, not improvements. Not going to eat rhubarb ever again. I don't care when it is in Minnesota. It's not happening. And I still lock my door because I'm a big city kid from the East Coast, and doors are locked if they're not in use. That's how that works in my head. As opposed to my neighbors who leave their front doors wide open. And I can't even, I'm not shocked. I'm not repulsed, but I could never do that.
No, I couldn't relax.
And it's not even a meaningful difference. It's not a meaningful, there's nothing attached to it. Neither of those things are good or bad, but different and different enough, and there are enough of those differences that you're like, nope, there's a cultural shock in moving halfway across the country here. It's just that big a country. So I even think within the country, even if that's all you're moving is within the US, there are still certain things that will be weird,
Oh yeah. I think what you said about neutrality is really nice. Like I like to suggest that people look at things with a neutral viewpoint. Whether you're reading the cards, like they're no good or bad cards, there are things that are challenging or interesting. And like it's good to be curious, it's good to be compassionate. Like we have a lot of things in common with other people. We also have differences. Like definitely being in a Roma household, we have pretty clear rules about like cleanliness and how things are done. But we also share a lot with other diasporic cultures about that too, though.
Yeah, and that's pretty common, I find, as you
Yeah.
venture into those different range, different areas. Wanted to talk a little bit more about the book. I want to know if you guys have any particularly favorite bits or tips that you really liked that you got to put in the book. Who wants to go first?
Okay. So I really like the how to be convincing part of the book. I think, yeah, like it just touches on some things that I don't really see a lot of. And I feel like that's what we were, or that's what I was taught, that's what we were taught a little bit like growing up. Like it's about your tone of voice and you have to sit up straight when you communicate with people. And if you're not completely sure about something, say that. Like, I'm not completely sure about this, but I'm feeling blah, blah, blah. Like, being honest and genuine while still trying to also like be ultimately a performer to a degree. Like it is a spiritual process, but like we're doing this on the streets, and like we need to get people's attention, and like we need to make it fun. And people, there's a stigma about that part of fortune telling, but I really feel like it's important. And there's even times where like we don't want to, but like we're hired for like a gig and they're like, if you could dress, maybe like a fortune teller, and we're like, okay, like we'll do it for the check, you know what I mean? But yeah, like there's that part that not a lot of people talk about that. So I really like to talk about that, and I really like to give those kind of like tips and tricks for people that are just learning fortune telling, but also has nothing to do with fortune telling. Like even if you just want to like learn how to present yourself like in a nice way, I guess, I feel like, yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I really love that section too, like for all of the reasons Paulina just said. I also really like our dream divination chapter because we have a big chapter on intuition and just intuitive reading practices that we grew up with as kids, because I mean, you can read any book with the card definitions, but what's special about, our book and our process is that we as children were taught like it's okay if you don't remember what a card means. You've got to go on your intuition and trust like your ancestors, your spirits are showing up for you, because you're like 10 and you're reading for someone for the first time, and like Paulina said, you've got to be convincing. And so you can be honest about what you feel even if you don't remember what a card is in the moment. So dream divination is one of the ways that both Paulina and I were raised to pay attention to our dreams and think of dreams as a place where you get communication, where you start to understand the symbols that your spirits communicate to you with. And it was also just fun to share our dreams. Paulina has a really funny dream that she shared, a recurring dream of being in the bathtub with a bunch of nuns and rubber duckies. I shared our dream about crocodiles, and we like analyze. We show you how to analyze or how we approach it.
Because that personal individualistic approach is so important. I'm very fond of using an example of someone I was acquainted with years ago whose first encounter with roses was at the funeral of their favorite grandparent.
Mm-hmm.
Roses will never mean love to this human being.
Yeah,
they will always mean grief and loss. So that idea of your communication, your interpretation, having to be central to what you're working on. I love that that's a part of the angle that you guys operate from. I should ask, because I don't recall, I'm looking at the table of contents right now. Was it always tarot, or was it ever also just playing cards for reading fortunes?
I grew up reading playing cards primarily, and I actually switched to tarot when I was like 12 because I was like, Grandma, I think I do better business. And she was like, yeah, you're probably right, because it was just more popular at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people grew up playing using tarot cards. I really didn't. Like some people in my family would use playing cards. My grandmother would use playing cards, but I was just like way more interested. I was like, we play games with playing cards, bro. You know what I mean?
Also, playing card reading. I don't know if you found this, Paulina. I think we've talked about it in interviews, but haven't actually talked to each other about it. But they tend to be a little more like direct in a way that doesn't always work for an American audience, where like it's a little more blunt. And both Paulina and I tend to be like fairly blunt, but like tarot at least has more room for nuance, and whereas playing cards can be a little more predictive. And for me personally, I didn't feel like that worked as well with an American audience, but that would be something that I would do for family.
And part of the reason I ask is that was the first thing I was taught by my grandmother, by my little Irish grandmother, playing cards. And what I found was years and years later, as Lenormand became popular, a lot of what she taught me is in those Lenormand decks. And I was a little shocked by that, because I really thought it was just, did she just make this up to entertain her oldest grandchild because it was raining that day and we were stuck together?
No, it's real. It's so interesting too, because it also varies regionally. Like I was just talking to a Brazilian Roma person, and she was like, "Oh, we mostly use Lenormand here. Like all the Roma read with these cards. We don't read with tarot as much." So it's like, cartomancy in general is just something that Roma love, and tea leaf reading is in coffee reading and palmistry and face reading. Like there's so many things that come from the part of the world first that we came from. Although tea leaf reading, I'm sure, exists in every culture that drinks tea. They probably have their own like practice, but palmistry is an Indian Ayurvedic art which spread along the Silk Road, and it has its iterations in other parts of Asia, and then we took it and popularized it in the West.
And in fact, we have a palm reader here on staff who does a class once a month. Absolutely brilliant, because it's all he does.
Yeah,
so
cool.
Knowledge is just amazing. But I think that's kind of what it takes. When you hone in on one, I think, unless you're surrounded and immersed in all of it, honing in on one, I think.
Yeah, we had to learn all of them.
Yeah, but if every family member can do it.
Yeah, no, it was great.
Steeped in it, and that's just perfect for that. It's like,
it was a
did we
beautiful.
make tea? Why wouldn't we read those tea leaves then? Mind you,
absolutely.
Mine would just be a bunch of sticks, because there's no actual tea in here today. But
you can read some sticks.
Might be harder to see a few of the shapes. Just saying.
Gotta be adaptable,
But Ostron, those little pieces of rhodiola. Okay. Well, I know we're just about out of time, so I want to say thank you to you both for coming on and chatting. And I want to show this off again. This is beautiful. Thank you. I'm so excited to explore more on Paganistan, or not Paganistan, sorry, we have Paganistan here in the Twin Cities. Romastan.
Yeah, Romanistan.
Thank you, Romanistan. I think it's going to be a fascinating field trip for me to go there. So I hope everybody else who tunes in and watches will have as much fun as I will exploring all of those things, because it's always fascinating to me, the little bits and pieces that I'm like, oh, no, that grandma did that. Oh, no. Versus, say, my American family.
So, interesting.
I find it fascinating. So I hope everybody else does too. In the meantime, grab the book, everybody. It's fabulous. The bits I have read, and I've read probably about 25 pages scattered throughout. I absolutely adored. So great storytelling talent in here. So thank you for that as well. And showing it off just one more time. Just look, everybody. Okay. And hopefully we'll see you again, maybe when that beautiful folk magic book comes out.
Yeah, we definitely got something we'd love to talk about in the future. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And if you guys are ever in the Twin Cities, let us know. We'd love to host you for an event. It would be loads of fun. You guys are both wonderful to speak with.
I can't say so much. That would be so fun.
You guys, you made this very easy, so I appreciate it. Thank you. And everybody, To everybody else, do the watching, the liking, the subscribing, the commenting. If you have comments for these two, I will happily pass them on. So don't hesitate. And we will see you guys next time. Blessed be everybody.